All right, I think it's live right now, but basically what I'm going to be talking about today, because basically there's a lot of racial issues going on, and a lot of people are essentially it's been engineered for a long time the attack on the United States through a racial angle, and I learned actually all it took was just a few seconds from a if you guys can't hear me, let me know because it's been raining all day and the frogs are very loud tonight. But basically, tonight I'm going to be talking about the fact that basically there was a movement by the Americans, by the power structure within America, specifically by the founding fathers, which was ultimately trying to deport the slaves to Africa, and that's why we have the country Liberia. And you know what? It's so loud in here that I'm going to go ahead and take this operation inside. So, all right, here I go. Inside I go. Oh, God, it's so loud. I'm sorry. 1 second, everybody. Great. Y'all can stay out there if you want. I'll be right back. Right back. Okay. All right. So my drink is out there. Okay. Now we're going to talk about the okay, and there were great extreme measures taken by the founding fathers and the Americans to try to do something very extraordinary, which was the creation essentially of a country. And they were going to deport the Africans to the slaves basically out of the country, because you have to understand they inherited slavery. The colonies, the evil essentially kings and crazy people who even started the institution of slavery. In fact, um, they did in fact slavery into our hands, machine basically working, I was watching Crash Course, which is like a really neat little factoid history lesson thing, and it just barely mentioned the American. Well, let me go ahead and bring up some of this information. This is very important. This is one of those suppressed topics that would really help if we repeated it over and over again. I mean, the way you sum it up is this is why Kennedy was assassinated. I mean, not Kennedy. This is why Lincoln was assassinated. Uh, Lincoln sought deportation. A lot of people were like, "Oh, that's so racist." But can you believe that they were actually pitching that argument of racism while they were still slaves? They were like, "Us free black people are deserve equal rights, and that is racist to make for us to do that." And so this actually shows the level of human rights that were actually present. That they, because a lot of people just think it was just raw indignation, which, I'm not going to say that wasn't the case or that wasn't prone to happening. But what's really important is to notice that they were actually using arguments of human rights and indignation in the process of attempting to abolish the institution of slavery, and specifically when, hold on, I'm trying to think about what I was saying. So when they were trying to abolish slavery, they were clearly thinking. It's unfortunate that we attacked Abraham Lincoln the way we did. Apparently, everybody missed the point. I'm going to go ahead and read this. This is from the Washington Times in 2011, February 9th, 2011. Book, is that a colon? Yeah, book, colon, Lincoln sought to deport freed slaves. The great emancipator was almost the great colonizer. Newly released documents show that to a greater degree than historians had previously known, President Lincoln laid the groundwork to ship freed slaves overseas to help prevent racial strife in the U.S. Oh my God, this is so why he was assassinated. Just after he issued the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, Lincoln authorized plans to pursue a freedmen's settlement in present-day Belize and another in Guyana, both colonial possessions of Great Britain at the time, said Philip Magnus, one of the researchers who uncovered the new documents. I'm sorry. I mean, I may as well just be reading this out loud. But the problem is I don't want to be spreading disinformation. Historians have debated how seriously Lincoln took the colonization efforts, but Mr. Magnus said the story he uncovered, to be published next week in a book, Colonization After Emancipation, Lincoln and the Movement for Black Resettlement, shows the president didn't just flirt with the idea, as historians had previously known, but that he personally pursued it for some time. This is why there's all of these quotes of Lincoln saying he doesn't want to free the slaves and he thinks white people are superior and stuff like that. Oh my gosh. Quote, the way that Lincoln historians have grappled with colonization has always been troublesome. It doesn't mesh with the whole emancipators, Mr. Magnus said. The revelation of this story changes the picture on that because a lot of historians have tended to downplay the colonization. What we know now is he did continue the effort for at least a year after the proclamation was signed. Mr. Magnus said the key documents he and his co-author Sebastian N. Page, a junior research fellow at Oxford, found were in British archives and included an order authorizing a British colonial agent to begin recruiting freed slaves to be sent to the Caribbean. Because by that time, I don't know, I can't remember when that happened, but Haiti ended up sort of, getting rid of their European colonial powers, and so there were essentially like nearby thriving, not to mention Liberia, which was the reason it's primary, which is a colony of the which was a colony of the United States. Now it's an entire country, whereby it's basically made up of a bunch of freed black slaves that were basically sent there. Okay, we'll get into that in a minute. By early 1864, scheme had fallen apart, with British officials fretting over the legality of the Emancipation Proclamation. With the risk that the South would still win the war, and with the U.S. Congress questioning how the money was being spent, roughly a year later, Lincoln was assassinated. People, I mean, it's just so clear. I encourage everybody to watch the documentary. Um, The Money Masters, to look into this more. Anyway, yeah, I did have some thoughts because I said, oh my God, it's true, he did. Or, well, what I first said was, it appears Lincoln could have been assassinated because he was going to deport the slaves to Liberia. Oh my God, it's true, he did. This is why the conspirators assassinated him. They wanted to release the slaves, to sow division. As early as the end of the Civil War, slavery was used against the states. This is what black people need to understand. They have been engineered and they have been promoted by people seeking to destroy the country, to become malcontents who are forever conspiring. And I mean, it's pretty obvious they're engineered in a way to just hate white people. And obviously the result is we have a president who we can't even, or who we're having a hard time impeaching right now, who basically continued the atrocities, who's basically a total Manchurian candidate, who's continuing and expanding the atrocities of the Bush era. And so we shall have to see what ends up resulting. Let's see. And then I said, no wonder they are all over the white nationalists. They know all this shit. Okay, so yeah, white nationalists have in fact been guarding all the secrets. Why? Because, well, that should tell you that it is ultimately well, it may just be incidental that basically the white nationalists would be clued in because of the fact that an attack on America is essentially an attack using the slaves to attack the white people. But I would go and continue. I can't bring myself to entertain, yeah, because white nationalists are in fact heavily infiltrated by the federal powers, and they don't even understand it, So, I mean, the people that are infiltrating the white nationalists don't even understand just what they're screwing themselves up for, because the white nationalists are basically safeguarding all this information and are right. But the problem is, and I keep going, I can't bring myself to entertain the idea of making this a white nationalist thing. However, despite the fact that such an engine would go viral if pitched correctly. So what I'm saying is, if you did make it a white nationalist thing, and it's already kind of happening in a way, basically you can get people to be like, oh, we have a common ground, specifically being pro-white, and we can actually viralize that and think we're solving the problem. But it's not only would it just not be nearly as effective, but it's going to have a bad name, and this is what I mean here. The Nazi operation ensured it would never work and suffer from a supremacy slant in the PR department. That's right. So the controlled opposition movement of the Nazis would forever brand the greatest evil mankind has ever committed, which is the love of the white people, basically. So that was a totally fabricated event. Oh, that is so sick, dude. They actually fabricate World War II specifically for the purpose of forever vilifying anyone who would question the Jews or have a Zionist conspiracy theory or think that white people should ever like band together, basically. in order to say, in order to do something like suddenly it's now an attribute of the white people that anything that they would do, such as be concerned about racial issues, would effectively, oh my God, man, you see it so plain. No wonder they're like that. Yeah, basically, there's been such an attack on thinking about, racial discrimination that it's been paralyzing the whites, and they can't. There's there's basically a violent reaction. Like I was watching how CNN was trying to show, like, oh, some black people are actually voicing their um, forgiveness of Paula Deen, and they show these three black girls who look like they stopped them on the New York street, and they said, what do you think about Paula Deen saying the N-word? And then the girl, this is supposed to be like forgiving Paula Deen. The girl's like, oh well, after Paula Deen said it 30 years ago, oh well, let me try to remember this. Oh well, it was. Oh well, no, that was totally serious. That's really bad. Like, had this reaction of like, she basically deserves to die, because she said that 30 years ago. But, I'll cut her a break. I'll cut her a break. And like that was the message. That was the black people are forgiving Paula Deen. It was like, she deserves to die, but we'll give her a break this time. You know what I mean? That is so crazy. Anyway, that's clearly a very big cog in the wheel as to what's screwing everything up. Let me take a look and see if I got any comments. Okay, now, Bolivia, did you say, or Belize? I think it said Belize, I don't know. But I do know that the entire country, Liberia, which speaks English, American English, like I actually worked as a maintenance guy at an apartment complex with, well, I didn't work there, but, well, yeah, I think he actually did come in at the same time right before I left, and but I still lived there, and it was a black dude who I would never have even known he was foreign if he had. This is actually quite worth telling. He didn't have the same negative opinion and resentment towards white people that other black people do, and that was the only reason that it indicated to me that he was foreign, because he had the same. He was basically had an American accent. I mean, there was a little bit of an accent, but I mean, it wasn't enough to tell. And he was fluent English. And then you find out he's from Africa, and you're like, what? Where are you from? He's like, Liberia. And then I'm like, tell me about that. He's like, yeah, it's an American colony, which is just, you don't even hear about these things because it's a suppressed topic. It's the reason that Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. So, and then at the same time, he just never had that extreme negative resentment towards white people. Unfortunately, he probably does now as a result of white people having a reverse racism from, just being like, oh, you're a nice black person. Well, I'm going to be, I'm going to show you how tough I am and stuff like that. So, but the thing is that that would ultimately have been that would have been the relationship between whites and blacks if the founding fathers would have effectively did what they were trying to do, which to such an extent that there was a civil war going on. In fact, why don't we just go ahead and like turn the camera around and let you see some of these things. In fact, I'll just go ahead and read this. This is very important because there's so many racial issues going around right now. So I said, did you know the founders colonized Liberia and planned to end slavery and deport the slaves to Liberia? Okay. In light of so many racial issues creeping up in the mainstream media, this might be an interesting topic. It is not pro-white or anti-black or anti-Jew or anything. Many people are not aware of an early humanitarian attempt to abolish slavery in early American history by the American Colonization Society, which was supported by some of the founding fathers. In fact, I think one of them, I think the original president was the nephew of George Washington, and I think that Andrew Jackson was all for it and stuff like that. And Andrew Jackson was trying to like stop the international banking conspiracy. I mean, all this stuff was totally out in the open, and yet they won anyway. I don't know how this happened. Well, the Titanic, basically. All right, America inherited the institution of slavery from the colonial era, and the powers in America knew it needed to be dealt with, and the European bankers stopped it. This is a suppressed topic, and it is something I developed independently. It's not, to my knowledge, championed on any white nationalist websites, for instance. And I did. I mean, all I did was I just literally heard this. I'm going to go ahead and click on that right now. 812. And this pitch is like the mainstream version, which was, it was a racist thing that they did this.
We are the greatest lawmen that ever lived and died.
This will tickle a bit.
I guess it's not too bad. I mean, as a result, well, let's just go ahead and...
Hi, I'm John Green. This is Crash Course U.S. History.
This is a really good YouTube channel. I mean, a lot of it is going to teach you stuff that you never even heard. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and put it at the spot that helped me, that gave me this idea.
And especially slaves, which brings us to abolition. Let's go to the thought bubble. Abolitionism was the biggest reform movement in the first half of the 19th century, probably because, sorry, alcohol and fast dancing, slavery was the worst. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the only challengers to slavery were slaves themselves, free blacks, and Quakers. But in the early 19th century, colonizationists began to gain ground. Their idea was to ship all former slaves back to Africa, and the American Colonization Society became popular and wealthy enough to establish Liberia as an independent homeland for former slaves. While the idea was impractical and racist, it appealed to politicians like Andrew Jackson and Henry Clay, and some black people who figured that America's racism would never allow them to be treated as equals did choose to emigrate to Liberia. But most free blacks opposed the idea. In fact, in 1817, 3,000 of them assembled in Philadelphia and declared that black people were entitled to the same freedom as whites. By 1830, advocates for the end of slavery became more and more radical, like William Lloyd Garrison, whose magazine...
Okay. And when you do a little bit of research on it, you see like there's a massive cover-up going on. Like they're actually trying to say, no, these people were pro-slavery. But the truth is that there was a conspiracy against it to such an extent that the European central bankers or whatever funding a resistance to it, and that's why the Civil War happened. That's why the Civil War happened. The Civil War happened to end slavery and deport the slaves. And because it was so unpopular, they had to be very hush-hush about it. Like even in here, when it comes to this, political attempt, this early political attempt of the American Colonization Society, they were actually trying to pitch it in a way that it seemed kind of like, I don't know, like friendly to the slavers or something like that. I don't know. It was very odd. Like they were. Let's go ahead and continue reading. Oh well, I'll just leave it on me. So. Yeah, but just from that one segment, I didn't even look into it. I was just like, you know what? There's something to that, and that is totally what happened. These guys, these founding fathers, were not lazy. They were. This is what happens when you have like the slightest amount of like unsuppressed brain power going on. Guess you guys just watch me spill water on myself. All right. All right. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out where I was at. Okay, America inherited the institution of slavery from the colonial era. So now it's like oh, America, built on the backs of slaves. Well, the fact of the matter is that America inherited the institution of slavery. We took over the country by which there was already um, the institution of slavery and the, you know, the resentment from the Native Americans. Did you know that Jefferson foresaw all of these racial tensions to such an extent that he wished that we had intermingled and interbred with the native population? Which I think really should indicate to people that the natives were white enough to be considered white, basically, which suggests that the Scandinavian peoples did in fact interbreed. Like, they don't want that. That's also a suppressed topic. God, there's so many suppressed topics. That basically the Native Americans were in fact partly European and Asian. Okay, and so the Native Americans were really a interbreeding, or the result of European peoples and Asians crossing into those continents. And in fact, there's already plenty of evidence to suggest that the Vikings were at least landing in this location. But I think it's a much more ingrained sort of thing that the Native Americans were in fact had essentially. But the fact that Jefferson would contemplate, like, I wish that we had interbred with the natives so that we could have a unified. He was very concerned about racial things, and I think he even, I don't know, I think he even fathered interracial children. So it was like a topic of his to think about race or something like that. And he was concerned for the future of America. Isn't that interesting that people were thinking about the future of humanity? Like, I'm going to die, basically, and I want to see this system work. And he was even, thinking like, okay, there's going to be public perceptual backlash from what we did to, for being white or European, what we did to the natives, what we may look like we did to the natives, and what we may look like we did to the blacks. And he was taking measures, the Founding Fathers in general probably were taking measures to combat that even at that time. So obviously the psyoping sons of bitches were coming in and destroying everything. If you want to know about all this stuff, you have to watch that documentary, the Money Masters documentary. Anyway, this is absolutely sad, because you could imagine the much better race relations that we would be having if they were in fact successful, but they were not. So let's go ahead and continue looking at the comments. Scotland for the win. You see, yeah, well, I don't know what's going on with that Monty versus conservatives thing. That's really odd. Monty's the kind of person that if he, it looks like if he sees some sort of weakness, he'll get into it or something like that. I don't know. I just didn't know that he would be like that, to be honest with you. Maybe he has some sort of purpose behind it. Let's see. It does appear. See, he promoted Mr. Lawless, and I like Mr. Lawless. I don't know why Mr. Lawless has disappeared. Say Scotland for the win. Bolivia, did you say, or Belize? Okay. So where was I? I guess I'm just sort of reading what I wrote. America inherited the institution of slavery from the colonial era, and the powers in America knew it needed to be dealt with, and the European bankers stopped it. This is a suppressed topic, and it is something I developed independently, which from that small video, but I've looked into a little bit more, like just a little bit more past that. It's not, but the reason I said that was I didn't want people to think I was just going to white supremacy websites to find it. It's not, to my knowledge, championed by any of the white nationalist websites, for instance. And I really just don't see it there. You know, a lot of these white nationalist shills within the movement, try to and put a lot of inflammatory, and they suppress those kind of things. While it has since been slandered as racist, and they actually tried to make the argument at the time, it was isn't it neat that they'll entertain conspiracy theories when it benefits them? It was an American conspiracy to colonize Africa. These are simply not true. The founders knew the institution they had inherited. I'd like to continue. You know, the Americans were trying to abolish slavery, needed to be ended, but were concerned about racial tensions which would arise from the blacks being forever malcontent to the whites for the history they had endured. And the whites would never accept them into society, the blacks into society, probably as a result of those tensions. In other words, it was a problem for the country. So they took major steps to try to both end the institution and deport them to an American colony in Africa. The ACS, or the American Colonization Society, went so far as setting everything up by founding the colony of Liberia, which is now a country. The official language is basically American English as a result. Quote, along with Ethiopia, Liberia is one of the only two modern countries in sub-Saharan Africa without roots in the European colonization of Africa. Beginning in 1820, the region was colonized by blacks from the United States, most of whom were freed slaves. These immigrants established a new country with the help of American Colonization Society, a private organization which believed that former slaves would have greater freedom and equality in Africa. African captives freed from slave ships were also sent there instead of being repatriated to their countries of origin. In 1847, this new country became the Republic of Liberia, establishing a government modeled on that of the United States and naming its capital city, Monrovia, after James Monroe, the fifth president of the United States. That's how early it was. Well, no, they just named it after the fifth one. And a prominent supporter of the colonization. The colonists, known as Americo-Liberians, led the political and economic sectors of the country. So there was apparently a very, they were creating a country. I mean, that shows not only the amount of power behind it, but also the amount of effort that was going into this abolitionist attempt. They did not want to just release all of these slaves into the country. And you might call that like a racist move, but the truth is that the Quakers, for instance, wanted to just release the slaves but then not associate with them. It was kind of like they knew slavery was wrong. This is an example of what they were saying. They were like, we know slavery is wrong. We want to get rid of the activity of slavery, but that doesn't mean that we want to mingle with them or be around them. So there was obviously going to be a problem. I mean, if you have to be a solid, unified country, then the racial tensions would naturally divide the country, and there would be sort of an issue. Basically, it compromised the Constitution, which, by the way, has been totally compromised, and they've actually been quite effective, and hopefully we can take it back before this is too late. So, basically, free slaves, slave owners, European. I mean, is this necessary now? No. I mean, it's just, I think effectively getting this message out to black people and hopefully the black people will be able to. Well, that's the thing. Like, a lot of things need to be said outright. You don't need to like re-engineer people. You just need to tell them the truth. And when black people come to understand that ever since they were born, they've been engineered basically to have either a conscious or subconscious severe hatred towards towards white Americans, then in fact maybe they'll change their mind. That would be the effect of changing their mind, and then there would not be this constant violent disposition on their part. Like, even as I'm saying that, I'm sitting there feeling like, oh my God, like there's obviously also a disposition in whites which hinders our capacity to speak about these things, but it's just the way things are. So let's continue. Basically, free slaves, slave owners, European banking interests, actually the Tsar of Russia and German Chancellor, according to the Money Masters documentary, were aware of the European central bankers who had vested interest in the South during the Civil War. We'll play a video on that in a second. And general anti-abolitionists trying to protect the economy achieved through slavery, and abolitionists who wanted to end racism in general. So they were actually probably funding abolitionists to be like, and in fact, in that little clip right there, that was who stopped this. White abolitionists, before the abolitionist movement even went out, who were like, that is totally racist. I want to end slavery, but I want to live with the blacks. That's how early on they were already planning on sowing the seeds of division. I mean, I've already posted a video on the guy who in 1912 said, we're going to propound into the consciousness of the darker races the natural oppression of the whites, which will, I'd have to quote it, which will, obviously, and then we will like promote the darker races, or the blacks, into society, because the whites will have such a guilt complex, and it will ultimately deliver America into our hands, which is, by the way, a racist statement. It's like, oh, really? So, promoting blacks in society is going to, whatever. I'm not going to continue with that argument, but, obviously there is some incentive here for black people to, despite the fact that they're on record saying that we want to promote and destroy white people, and there is, it would basically take a saintly maneuver on behalf of our black brothers and sisters to realize that their essential suppression of the white races. You might think, oh, that's not true. Let me tell you something. There is a stereotype, and they even showed it on there. They showed these like white people in a van, and they were licking vanilla ice cream cones, and they're like, ha, that black girl testifying is stupid, or they said something like to that. It was some kind of message like that, and it made all the black people go, oh, that is so racist, and that's what they're all like. That's what, look at them all happy. And it's like, no, the vast majority of white people are so not like that. Okay, the vast majority of white people is your maintenance guy who comes in and fixes your air conditioner and has no hatred towards black people, and is just a very, nice man who probably is single or got a divorce and doesn't have any children, and is, or maybe he's been a virgin his whole life, and he's an older guy, like 40s or 50s. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's where the white people are at, okay? Like, not some loser who, has been promoted in society because of how much of a sheep and shithead he is, who, honestly needs to be punched in the face. But anyway, let me go ahead and continue. But am I that way? No. And but they like to believe that. They need, and it's just like oh, well, Paula Deen deserves to die, but, I'll go ahead and forgive her this time. Let's see. And abolitionists who wanted to end racism in general all collectively made, all those groups all collectively made the already enormous objective of creating a country fail. This is probably why the Civil War was even engineered by by both sides coming into conflict. It has since become a suppressed topic, likely because the American people have been under the attack of the bankers since then. But the important thing to understand is that it would have resulted in freeing the slaves and solving the race issues in one fell swoop. Instead, what happened was the further continuation of slavery and the intense racial division that persists to this day. Here this is about the German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck, and he said that the bankers are splitting the states up, and the Tsar is mentioned at 120. So let's go ahead and watch. Let's just go ahead and listen to this. So 115 and 120.
The central bankers now saw an opportunity.
Okay, here we go.
A bad example for the rest of the world. The central bankers now saw an opportunity to split the rich new nation, to divide and conquer by war. Was this just some sort of wild conspiracy theory at the time? Well, let's take a look at what a well-placed observer of the scene had to say at the time. His name was Otto von Bismarck, Chancellor of Germany, the man who united the German states a few years later. The division of the United States into federations of equal force was decided long before the Civil War by the high financial powers of Europe. These bankers were afraid that the United States, if they remained as one bloc and as one nation, would attain economic and financial independence, which would upset their financial domination over the world.
He said that.
Within months after the first shots here at Fort Sumter,
Okay, now we're going to
the
skip
central
ahead.
bankers loaned Napoleon III of France.
This is the Russian guy. So they were behind the South.
Mischievous financial policy, which has its origins in North America, shall become indurated down to a fixture, then that government will furnish its own money without cost. It will pay off debts and be without debt. It will have all the money necessary to carry on its commerce. It will become prosperous
Not
without
this.
precedent in the history of the world. The brains and wealth of all countries will go to North America. That country must be destroyed, or it will destroy every monarchy on the globe.
The scheme was effective, so effective that the next year, 1863, with federal and Confederate troops beginning to mass for the decisive battle of the Civil War, and the Treasury in need of further congressional authority to issue more greenbacks, Lincoln...
What happened? Did I miss it? Let's see. What's going on here? Alright, I'm sorry. Let me refresh it.
The central bankers now saw an opportunity to split the
Come on.
further congressional authority to issue more greenbacks. Lincoln allowed the bankers to push through the National Bank Act. These new national banks would operate under a virtual tax-free status and collectively had the exclusive monopoly power to create the new form of money, banknotes. Though greenbacks continued to circulate, their numbers were not increased. But most importantly, from this point on, the entire and the
You know what? I'm sorry. I really just...
Prerogative of government, but it is the government's greatest creative.
greenbacks. With this new money, Lincoln paid the troops and bought their supplies. During the course of the war, nearly $450 million. When Lincoln asked if the people of the United States would accept the notes, Taylor said,
Okay, you know what? I'm sorry. I just can't find it, but it's right there in that area, and it talks about how the Russian Tsar was keeping a close eye on the American Civil War, and he was afraid. You know what? I think I know where that's at. He was afraid because he saw the European central bankers who he was opposed to watching as they were eyeing the South and he said he was going to intervene if he saw the European central bankers trying to support the South. Oh. Well, they were already behind it all. So, how very interesting, right? Say Scotland for the win. Can you please say Scotland for the win? Scotland for the win. Please send me a shout out. What's up, Thunder Voltage Gaming? Terry Bartlett. I assume you read the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, then. Yes, yes. Yes, I have. Ma Nigga Brink. What's up, Bear? As it outlines using the black-white tensions to their gain. That's right. Masterminding the whole shebang, etc. That's right. So, yes, in fact, they have done a quite effective job at doing the best they can to subvert the country. And you know, the craziest part is that at some point they clearly said, you know what, I want to essentially pretend that, or no, we're not going to destroy America. In fact, what we're going to do is we're going to turn America into this shining, you know, false capitalism. And they created this sort of strange central banking system out of the Federal Reserve after they, you know, basically, like, I have to say something. J.P. Morgan was very instrumental in the creation of the Federal Reserve in the sense that he was like a muscle man. Like, he was literally like muscling his competition out. He was like locking them on his boat. He, you know, at some point just before the Federal Reserve, he had locked everybody in a, like, he engineered a crisis basically, and then locked all of the bankers that were, you know, competitive bankers in a room, and then compromised them all somehow. And then, of course, the Titanic incident happened, which I suspect is a conspiracy, and a number of people who died on that ship. If you want to look into that, look into the Titanic conspiracy, and you'll see the story about the shady stuff that happened there. How it was actually not the Titanic, but the sister ship, because the sister ship had undergone such damage that it was scheduled for whatever demolition, and he decided instead to load it up with his enemies and subsequently kill them all. So, what else is there to say? Oh, there it is. I just saw the Russian guy. Russia. There you are. What is that? 122? Yep, that's him. Okay. Let's go ahead and listen to that real quick.
The Tsar, like Bismarck in Germany, knew what the international money changers were up to, and had steadfastly refused to let them set up a central bank in Russia. If America survived and was able to remain out of their clutches, the Tsar's position would remain secure. If the bankers were successful at dividing America and giving the pieces back to Great Britain and France, both nations under control of their central banks, eventually they would threaten Russia again. So the Tsar gave orders that if either England or France actively intervened and gave aid to the South, Russia would consider such action as a declaration of war. He did the same with part of his Pacific Fleet and sent them to port in San Francisco. Lincoln was re-elected the next year, 1864. Had he lived, he would surely have killed the National Bank's money monopoly extracted from him during the war. On November 21st.
So it's really unfortunate that we attacked Lincoln recently like we did, because essentially they wanted us to, because they knew the PR would be bad. We'd be like, oh my God, you guys are siding with the South, or are you a bunch of racists and stuff like that? Well, anyway, I don't know what's going on now, but you know, there's so much to be taught. There's so much to be learned, and it's all monolithic basically. It's all, you know, hinging on one specific objective. And just to show you, like, some more information on this specific subject, we have Putin saying, I'm going to read this to you. Putin, 80% of the first Soviet government was Jewish. So a lot of people say, like, oh, you know, basically what happened and was essentially smokescreened by the First World War was the destruction of the Russian royalty, specifically by a racially motivated group of Jews. And this is why, you know, people say the Protocols of the Elders of Zion was a propaganda piece, and then it's like, okay, well, how effective was it? Because, you know, 1 year after it was published or something like that, or after it got around, you know, or I don't know if it was 1 year or just like a few years, basically the Jews did exactly what they said they were going to do. So, you know, I guess I am kind of getting into that racial topic right now, but let me go ahead and tell you something. Like, when I talk about Jews, I'm not talking about a race of people. I do not believe that there is such a race. And I think that it is the identification of oneself as a Jew which makes somebody a Jew. And that people should seriously consider the fact that it is their choice to identify themselves as Jews, and it's not even religious. Like, they literally think that they have a racial quality to themselves. And you know, that is that it's loaded. It's a loaded term which has been societally engineered specifically for the purpose of conspiracy. And you know, just like maybe somebody qualifies as being an Aryan, you know, do you necessarily then call yourself Aryan when it's a loaded term which means master race, or, you know, whatever? I mean, do people go around identifying themselves as Aryans? So Jews, really, it's, you know, when you talk about Jew, you're not really talking about some sort of innocent trait. You're talking about somebody who fundamentally believes that they're fundamentally believing they have this loaded term which designates, you know, the chosen ones, the, you know, they're one day going to rule over the planet. They are fundamentally different from the rest of humanity in terms of both physical and soul, like they're better, basically. You know, it's their religion, basically. So that's very important to make that distinction. Anyway, let's go ahead and continue. Posted by the EU Times on June 23rd, 2013. This is recent. Okay? Listen to this article. Russian President Vladimir Putin has said that Jews made up 80 to 85% of the first government of the Soviet Union following the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917. Putin's speech, made on June 13, 2013, was reported by the official Jewish telegraphic agency in an article 6 days later dealing with Putin's visit to Moscow, quote, Jewish Museum and Tolerance Center, unquote. So there was no, like, anti-Semitic thing here. He just mentioned something that was a fact. According to the JTA report, Putin said, with reference to a library belonging to Rabbi Joseph I. Schneerson, the late leader of the Chabad Lubavitch movement, that he, quote, thought about something just now, colon. The decision to nationalize this library was made by the first Soviet government, whose composition was 80 to 85% Jewish. So the people who, as was, you know, speculated, I mean, they, to such an extent that when the Bolsheviks killed the, you know, or basically overtook the country of Russia, they actually outlawed anti-Semitism specifically, and said the penalty for being found an anti-Semite is death. And then they went on a massive campaign of killing the specifically entitled the Whites, the movement called the Whites, which I don't know if they were loyalists or not. I don't know the history. But anyway, the Bolsheviks ended up massacring them and really torturing them, from what I hear. Like, I heard they boiled a priest alive and then forced his clergy members to drink his soup that his body created, and then they shot them. So that's really sick. And the people that were behind these sort of things are I don't see them having very good intentions in mind for humanity. So where else are we? So we got about 5 minutes left. Masterminding the whole shebang. Okay. Hey, Brink. Okay. Do you think, this is somebody else, do you think Zimmerman will get off? Yes, I think Zimmerman will get off. If he doesn't get off, then they have engineered then that's part of a conspiracy. And that whole Zimmerman thing was an entirely controlled event. Everything you're seeing when you tune that in is a 100% staged event. Like, I think Trayvon Martin might be alive, or they're just using his death for another reason to be blamed on this sort of situation. But that entire thing was a false flag. So this entire trial is basically a staged trial. And whatever they do with that, I don't know. But if it looks like what they're doing is either placating or moving things into this, era of pro-constitution, like, I can't tell what's going on, to be honest with you. Because what could be going on is the dismantling of the Iranian government. And while we're sitting here thinking we're making political progress, which there's no such thing. There needs to be literally like mass disclosure revolution / lynching going on, basically. So any sort of political progress is distractionary or who knows what. So we'll find out. So they didn't find any guns, Bear says, so they didn't find any guns with the whole shooting in Aurora. Holmes never had the arsenal they said he did. Holmes, you want to make friends calling out the Jews over. What? So what are you talking about? He didn't have the arsenal that they said he did. I don't know. Tell me more about that, Bear. There was clearly, according to the legitimate eyewitnesses, somebody in there firing, and to such an extent that the same legitimate eyewitness, exiting out towards the lobby, was running into mortally wounded victims who were bleeding out, and she tried to feel the guy's pulse, and then people were like, "Come on, he's coming back," which was a shooter in the lobby, basically. And multiple witnesses seeing this girl just drenched in blood, and there's the blood trail that's going behind the theater. And let's see, there's no feed. Well, that sucks. Somebody's not getting my feed. All right, so we got about 2 minutes before the hour is up. Thought we had a very good discussion. Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and sum things up. Basically, the way we solve this race baiting issue is to reveal to everyone that the founding fathers inherited slavery, which was burdened upon them by their, essentially like serfdom underneath the kings of Europe, and they had always had it in mind to end the institution. And their plan was to free the slaves, but then deport them to, or do the best they could to deport them to certain colonies. And their specific one that they were going to try was Liberia, to such an extent that they created an African country called Liberia, and this is all on record. And they were going to deport these malcontents, potential, malcontents, nation within a nation, nation subverters, whatever, to Africa, which had essentially been yet to have been in the shape that it's in now. Who knows what it was like then? But at the same time, it's just, I would assume, much more worse now because there's probably engineered diseases there and everything. So, I suppose tonight I didn't do too much projecting as to what's going on, because I'm sort of maintaining the theory. Like, I think Snowden has said, he issued some sort of new statement. I think he's a completely controlled asset. I think I actually played an integral role in this story of him, flying off to Moscow at this point, because Daniel Morgan Perry, a situation I made a big deal out of, which is the fact that he freaked out and revealed that the CIA was in Hong Kong and essentially probably working with Snowden. So now Snowden is actually pitching the story that he left Hong Kong because the government was coming after him. I'm also playing with the idea that it has been the NSA, which may actually be rebelling at this point, because I think the NSA may have been so clued in as to the big picture from listening to people, listening to us, that it may in fact, Snowden might be some sort of a poster child or a allegorical, what do they call, like some kind of a, Snowden might represent a general feature amongst the people in the NSA, which is something that they want to do or something like that. So it could, I don't like to rag on the NSA. Maybe in fact the NSA is the one trying to bring down the NSA. So you won't make friends calling out the Jews. LOL Brink. I know, I already told you that, and I didn't call out the Jews. I actually, I appreciate your input, but I didn't call out the Jews. I had a whole section about how the Jews are in fact victims of baggage of superstition, and it would be probably wise for the Jews to drop that nomenclature, to drop that name, and just like any white person would not want to be identified as an Aryan, because it's a loaded term, and it would be useful if they were to disassociate their race from this mythological attributed name of, descendant of Abraham, etc., etc. So, there's obviously nothing wrong with the way someone's born. There is. Anyway, I guess the feed is now over. A very good night to everybody. As for what to expect, well, like I said, you can, I guess we've got. All right. Good night, my friends. I'll see you again tomorrow. What do I think is going on? I don't know. I think it's some sort of international attempt to restore or to provide some level of disclosure. Why is Bush now leaving for Africa? Is there something significant there where Bush is now, living in living in Africa? It's almost like he's been exiled, basically. And in this ironic situation, he's now in Africa, where he has to, I don't know, it's just a very strange, it seems like a very strange thing. Okay, a very good night, and I will see you tomorrow, same time. TB23 out.